open, look on, no hands, look on, no frame, no shame. Numb me up like cocaine, can't focus, shaky game. Which moment makes a man? 'Cause I'm hoping it just begins.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Robert Groves, your host for the Groves Connection podcast. The Groves Connection brings you intimate conversations with pundits, providers, patients, leaders, and laypeople, all to help us understand a contradiction. How can our healthcare system be both magnificent and yet so deeply flawed? We're going inside healthcare to talk candidly with those who know. What they have to say may delight, surprise, frustrate, or at times even anger you. But I invite you to get curious and listen to the truth about healthcare and those who want to fix it. Maybe the answers have been there all along. We just need to make the connection. Are you ready to connect? Rishi Sikka, welcome to the Groves Connection.
Great to be here, Robert.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for so long, Rishi. You and I have known each other for some time, goes all the way back to Health Management Academy days, and you've always been a person that I've respected so much for what you've accomplished in healthcare and the way you think about it. So this is a real treat for me. I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm going to start way back. And some of these questions I've never asked you before, so I'm really interested to hear the answers. So talk to me about where you grew up, elementary school. What kind of kid were you? What was going on in your life?
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. The admiration and respect is mutual. So I
Thank you.
had both a relationship that is professional, collegial, and then personal, which is just the
trifecta. There it is.
A trifecta. That's right. You couldn't ask for much more. So that's been an awesome part of things. My parents were from India. They immigrated to the United States in the early 1970s, and I was born in Brooklyn, New York, but spent most of my growing up in central New Jersey. I was, although that's kind of like a hotbed right now, and for many years of a lot of people of Indian origin, I was probably one of the few Indian people growing up through elementary school, middle school, and high school. So that was probably an indelible part of my experience, and in some ways impacts even my leadership style and leadership values to this day. I started out in remedial education. And somehow,
Wait. I have a hard time imagining you in remedial education. I can't fathom that. What's that about?
Well, you asked about elementary school, so
yes.
Something even less than the slow learner group, to be honest with you. And I think that was an experience that it's still kind of memorable, some of those aspects that probably gave me this sense of determination and grit.
Yeah.
Ended up being pretty important to not be, I hate to frame it like this, to be categorized.
Was the remedial learning part of just a cultural misunderstanding? I mean, I can't imagine you having your insights are some of the best in healthcare. So it's hard for me to imagine that. So help me understand how that.
I think part of it was that I genuinely was just really behind.
Gotcha. Okay.
I know the way my parents kind of looked at it, even though some people kind of maybe suggested to them much along the lines they were kind of like, the public school system wants to give my son extra help. Well, we'll take it.
Fair. Yeah.
There was a period of time where I thought I was going to be a doctor. My mom is a doctor.
Oh, yeah.
And sometime around high school, I kind of changed my mind and I became really determined that I wanted to go into business. And, after high school, I ended up going to Wharton undergrad at the University of Pennsylvania.
Great school, yeah.
The classes that I found the most fulfilling and the most interesting were like around healthcare management, healthcare policy, healthcare economics.
Yeah.
I thought that one of the ways I could make a contribution in healthcare was by becoming a physician. And like so many things in life, and I know you and I have talked about this, I was very fortunate to connect and have a mentor.
Yes.
He was, back at that time was one of the first MD MBAs. He was a professor at Wharton at the School of Medicine.
So who is this you're speaking of now?
His name was Alan Hillman.
Alan Hillman.
So kind of at the last minute, I ended up, having this change in career paths. I did finish my, Wharton degree, took my pre-med electives, and then ended up going to medical school on scholarship at the Mayo Clinic.
From remedial education in elementary school to Wharton and Mayo.
Yeah.
So something changed dramatically along the way. And by the way, mentors, I have not spoken to a single successful person, at least in this context, that doesn't have at least one mentor who made a big difference in their lives. And I think it's important to recognize that. And that's why I asked for the name.
Yeah.
We just need to recognize that we are dependent on other people in so many ways for the successes that we have. And I think it's important to recognize that. But tell me about the transition. You had to be at some point making excellent grades. Where did that transition happen for you?
Probably around towards the end of elementary school, middle school.
So you did well in high school then?
Again, we're rewinding a little bit, my freshman year, I ended up becoming very good friends with an upperclassman. He was a junior African-American guy by the name of Craig Warren, who kind of took me under his wing. In terms of like, okay, here's the classes you should take. Here's the activities you should do.
Yeah.
Also gave me this real great lifelong habit of reading. And Craig is still a lifelong friend of mine. I'm godfather to his daughter.
Yeah.
These people in your life, and you got this reaction going on in you, and then they're like, and it kind of accelerates it all.
Yeah.
So key.
All right. So now we are at Mayo in medical school. Talk to us about that time in your life. Did it turn out to be what you expected? How did you decide, how am I going to specialize? Walk us through medical education.
Super tough. I didn't have like a big science background.
Oh, yeah.
So coming in, very small school. Back at the time, I think I had 28 or 30 people in my graduating class.
Wow.
I mean, it's very...
A lot of scrutiny going on there. You're under the microscope.
That's for sure. An extraordinarily patient-centric culture. And I've never, ever again been in a place where they make it so easy to take care of patients. Like logistics, the infrastructure, all of that was just so designed to enable people to care.
Yeah.
After Mayo, the environments I worked in, to care for patients was like really hard.
Yeah.
But at Mayo, that wasn't the case. And to see how a truly patient-centered culture, works was extraordinary. So that piece around cultural values was really big. A couple other big experiences. So when I got there, you had to select a faculty advisor. So on a dare, one of my classmates asked me to ask the CEO of Mayo Clinic, Robert Waller, to be my faculty. I took him up on the dare.
Yeah.
Went up to this assistant and said, I'd like a meeting with Dr. Waller. And she looks at the calendar, she says, would you like it next week or the week thereafter? And then she looks at me and she says, who the hell are you? Explained who I was and that I was wanted to ask him to be my faculty advisor. And she said, okay, why don't you write a little note and I will get it to him. So I wrote a nice letter, asking him to be my faculty advisor. And I stopped by her office every week for 3 months.
Wow.
Started bringing pastries too, right?
A very wise decision.
I don't know. Maybe it wasn't 3 months. Maybe it was 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever.
Yeah.
She finally said, I'm going to get you 15 minutes with him and that's it. And it's all on you. And, 15 great minutes. He agreed to be my faculty advisor. We met once a quarter for my entire career at Mayo.
Wow.
I still have notes of all those meetings.
If you don't ask, you'll never know.
It's
and the other lesson that is clear in that story is if people know that you're really committed, if you're persistent and you don't go away, huge thing. That persistence piece is also key. You don't want to badger, but you just want to say, I'm interested. Okay, I'm still interested. And that's, two great lessons in that story.
Yeah, no, that's a great reminder. Kind of some people have described me in a management context, like I'm a dog on a bone.
Yeah.
For my last 2 years in medical school, I moonlighted as a medical reporter for our NBC affiliate in Rochester, Minnesota.
Oh, wow. That must have been fascinating.
Very fascinating. What I learned then was I learned, doing some basics of reporting and video editing and voiceovers, and then obviously on-screen stuff. And what it meant for me, and I can look back on it, is it taught me how to communicate really sophisticated stuff to a lay audience.
Yeah.
And a mass communication, which, in the past couple of years has become really important.
Yes.
And if you want to know how that opportunity came real quick, I was at the end of the second year of medical school presenting, they had this sort of intro to history taking kind of class.
Right.
And I presented my patient to my attending. They called them consultants at Mayo Clinic. And at the end of my presentation, he said, "Great presentation. You have a great voice. You should be on television."
Oh, wow.
That's very nice of you to say. He said, "No, I'm serious. My sister-in-law is the anchor of the evening news. I'm going to introduce you guys."
Oh, my gosh.
Mayo had a pretty unique curriculum. In your third year, you get 4 to 5 months off to do anything you want.
Wow.
So I made sure my 4 to 5 months lined up in the winter, and I was not going to spend it in Rochester.
Yeah. Always thinking, Rishi, always thinking.
So I ended up spending about 5 months at Prudential Healthcare.
Oh my gosh, what an interesting choice. Yeah.
Prudential had a healthcare division, and it was mostly an HMO and managed care.
Yeah.
And research division headed by Jeff Copeland. Jeff ended up going to become the director of CDC a couple years later, but ended up working with becoming introduced, and again, a lifelong mentor and Dr. Ron Aubert, brilliant PhD epidemiologist and researcher.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught me how to work with big data, how to code SAS, the statistical programming language. He taught me so much about research and data analysis. He ended up hiring me as a consultant when he was at Medco while I was a resident. So I ended up doing consulting around data and health outcomes research when I was in residency, also when I was a junior attending. And we've had kind of a lifelong collaboration since then. And the skills he taught me on data analysis and health outcomes research were just invaluable.
Yeah, this is what you just described is sort of a tour de force of what mentorship means to the individual who is being mentored. And I love the fact that you're recognizing that and valuing those relationships. And then there were a couple of things that I wanted to say about the points that you made along the way. One is, I remember one of my mentors, John Hensing at Banner Health, told me one time when I asked him, how did you get into your position? What was different about you that you were chosen as what would have been at the time the chief medical officer, but what today would be considered the chief clinical officer of Banner Health, which is, over all of the clinical programs essentially. And he said, "Robert, it's one thing. It's the ability to communicate your ideas and engage people in considering the possibility that you might be right."
Yeah.
And communication is the key to all of that. That's my differentiator. I got nothing special beyond that. I disagree with him, and he had nothing special beyond that, but there is no doubt that he was brilliant at communication. And you just reemphasized that one point. So when anybody asks me what's the number one thing you need for leadership, my first answer is ethics and value. But the second answer is the ability to communicate that. And I think that's so important. Now, I want to go to the next stage now. So you're getting out of Mayo, and how did you make decisions around, I'm going to subspecialize, or I'm going to go to work, or, what was what's your first foray after getting that MD degree?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was going to do residency when I was kind of going through, because, I always want to combine the business and the clinical, but really felt like my journey wasn't done yet on the clinical aspect. And I thought I wanted to go into surgery.
Gotcha. Okay.
As I was sort of trying to make this decision, I remember that I talked to a lot of surgeons, and I asked them, how'd you make the decision? I need to go through it. And one of the questions I asked almost every surgeon I talked to was, if you had anything you could do with your free time, if you have an hour of time, if you have 2 hours of time, if you could do anything with your free time, what would you do? And Robert, the answer I invariably got was operate.
Yeah, there you go.
That's the kind of surgeon I want, but I realized that wasn't the kind of person I was.
Yeah.
I want to go ride my bike, read a book, work out, cook.
Yeah.
That was not going to gel for me. So I really wasn't sure what the heck I was going to do. I was thinking, oh, I'll do internal medicine as a backstop, which is totally different from surgery. But I thought I'd give one more specialty a try that I hadn't been exposed to, and that was emergency medicine. I ended up doing an away rotation. It's like August of my 4th year. And this is really late. I mean, I hadn't even decided what I was going to do.
Yes, that is late.
An emergency medicine rotation at Bellevue in New York City.
Ooh.
Probably the opposite side of the galactic universe from Rochester, Minnesota.
That is the opposite end of the spectrum, and it is sink or swim, you know?
Figured if I was going to be exposed to it and see, I needed to go to one of these iconic places and have that experience. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I liked the diversity of patients and problems and challenges. I liked the people.
Yeah.
You know, it was something I thought I could see myself doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember I came back to Rochester in September and I'm like, okay, I want to change all my applications from surgery to internal medicine to emergency medicine. And I'm positive that we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Ended up doing an intern year in internal medicine in New York City again.
Right.
The furthest thing from Mayo Clinic. I mean, I remember my first shift there at St. Vincent's in the ED. I was in the ER for my first month in my medicine rotation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Substance abuse, HIV, AIDS. This was back when AIDS
was a big deal. Yeah.
Right.
Death sentence often.
Yeah. So totally different world. And then I did my emergency medicine residency, PGY 2 through 4 program, 3 years at the old Boston City Hospital, Boston Medical Center.
Yep.
Loved it. Loved that place. Stayed on as an attending for 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just fabulous place, fabulous people, so mission driven.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask, let me clarify a little bit. So, you shift from surgery to emergency medicine, you do your emergency medicine training, go all the way through fellowship, and then you're a practicing attending physician in emergency medicine. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And how long did you do that? How long were you, just a doc? Well, never just a doc, because you probably always had directorships or whatever else.
10 to 15 years as an attending.
Is that right? Wow. I didn't realize you had practiced that long.
I estimated, because I worked in busy places in Boston and then in Chicago. I did a pretty accurate back of the envelope calculation over my career as an attending, not as a resident, as an attending. I estimate I'd seen somewhere between 20 to 25,000 patients.
Yeah. I mean, I tell you what, at places that you trained, it didn't take long to do that. I want to say something else about that. There are levels of membership in doctor society, right?
Yeah.
And you were very wise to continue on to a residency, because folks that have just gotten an MD, it's like, yeah, all right, they're a doctor, maybe they're DNOs, doctors in name only. They don't get the same respect as somebody who has gone through all of the trials and tribulations and then put their reputation on the line in practice. That's how you're fully into the club. Whether that's right or wrong, your credibility has benefited immensely from your history of actually doing what doctors do.
When you're a medical student, you think, oh, I know everything. But, that transition to residency is a really big one, right? You think, oh, there's no real benefit to being an attending, but there is a real big, again, because you don't have that safety net.
Exactly.
One thing, though, I think that has kind of changed a little bit is I think the MD degree is becoming like the law degree now.
Yeah.
Where a lot of people go to law school and never practice law.
Yep.
It's not as common back when I was going through it, but now it's like super duper common that people go to medical school and then they launch into a very different career path.
Yep.
With residency. And it's not only is that, I think, more acceptable, unless you're going to sort of do, clinical leadership work.
I want to fast forward a little bit now to get to your career on the administrative side of the coin or the leadership side of the coin. How did that occur? And talk us through. You wound up at Advocate at one point. Was that directly from your attending position? How did that happen?
While I was an attending, I worked for a startup in California.
Mm.
I ended up then starting a startup in the data and analytics space or health search space as well when I was in Boston. So, I guess what I'm saying is like, even while I was going down this clinical path, even from medical school and then residency doing consulting and this stuff as an attending, I'm kind of nurturing this passion or this other interest in the administrative aspect the whole time.
It never left you. Yeah.
It never left. After 4 years in Boston, my wife and I, we decided, she grew up mostly in Chicago, that we were going to go back to Chicago. And I ended up taking a straight clinical job at a hospital on the South Side, Advocate Christ Medical Center.
Right.
The busiest trauma center, not only in Chicago, but in the state of Illinois.
Yeah.
It was a very busy place, very busy place. So I joined the faculty there, straight up clinical. After about 2 or 3 months, they had an opening for director of performance improvement for the emergency department. They wanted one of the faculty, one of the staff to help with quality improvement in the emergency department. And so about 2 or 3 months in, and I applied for the role and I got it. I really didn't have any direct experience in quality improvement.
Right.
But I had this tremendous experience in data, being able to look at things statistically, program myself, all that kind of stuff. And this is back when there were these, you might remember, the core measures about time to antibiotics for pneumonia, diagnosis.
Oh, yes.
Time to AMI, all of that. And, honestly, we were kind of lagging in all of those kind of areas. And I applied some data. I did time motion analyses. I found the pain points, what distinguished great performance from not good, designed some interventions, worked with the docs in the department, and it turned around with a great team, all the performance measures for the emergency department. So the CEO of the hospital sees that and he's like, this is great. You just turned around all the core measures. You did a great job. I'd like you to do that for the hospital.
Yes.
This was Advocate's flagship, right? The biggest hospital, the most complex.
Right.
The CEO of the hospital, Ken Lucard, who plucked me out of the emergency department and gave me this role to do that work for the whole hospital. He has been an accelerant to my career.
Yes.
Just doing that, and at that age, taking me and believing in me, and frankly, seeing something in me that I didn't necessarily see. And 10 months, we turned around performance and ended up making Advocate Christ, a top 100 hospital. Back when, I think that was True Builder Solutions. I can't remember who was doing it back then, right?
Yeah.
And then the folks at Advocate Corporate saw that.
And they're thinking the same thing. Can you do it for the system, right? I mean, it just,
I'll tell you, one of the things that got me a lot of visibility when I was doing that role for the hospital, this was back when readmissions were a big thing. I guess they still are.
Right. Yeah.
And I was leading this team to improve readmissions, and the team said, we had a tool to predict somebody being readmitted. And I said, well, you know what? I've got some data background. I know how to program in SAS. And I built a readmission predictive model.
Wow. That is so cool.
Programmed it myself. We did some great work with some folks at the Advocate team. And that got me an additional level of visibility, where then the corporate folks, Jim Skogsberg, Lee Sachs, Bill Sanchuli kind of plucked me out. Again, Ken gave me that platform and that visibility.
Yeah.
And I ended up taking on a role at Advocate, just leading a tremendous team and a tremendous group in a great organization.
So you're an advocate now, and you have demonstrated your ability to, with all of the stuff that you've learned, a lot of it autodidacted, I guess, because you were so interested in business from the get-go. A lot of it mentors accelerating that pathway along the way. And you've got this skill set now that you, for the first time, have been able to apply it broadly.
Yeah.
And that has elevated you to the level where the system is now interested in your skill set. And so walk us through what that was like. Were there things that surprised you about that next level of leadership? Were there things that you wish you had done differently? For those who are aspiring to that level of leadership, what are the secret sauces along the way? What helped you? What didn't?
The places where I worked in the emergency department, particularly Boston Medical Center, you were always leading a team.
Yes,
right?
Indeed.
I think ED physicians, that's something that should be kind of recognized. Is the best ones are, and they recognize that they're mobilizing and they're deploying resources and they're mentoring and they're educating and they're doing all that at the same time. So that was present. I'd say the other thing, and I can't underestimate this, is I was extraordinarily blessed to have met, and I think you and I have talked about this, having an executive coach, Dr. Don Rath. And Don was an emergency medicine physician by background, so that was a great common base. We met when I was at Advocate Christ, and he also was a senior executive at Allina, kind of back in the day. So he had all those aspects, and he had some good understanding of the organization. But one of the most important things he did was also just sort of really own who I am as a leader, having that level of insight and self-reflection. And I would say it's a journey that never really ends, I think, if you're going to do leadership and if you want to sort of practice the craft. But he was certainly an accelerant, like Ken, like Ron,
yes,
throughout.
And that resonates with me so very deeply, because and one of the discoveries I've made along the way is, you're right, it's a lifetime commitment. And one of the discoveries that I've made along the way is that the more I become myself, the more effective I am, and the happier I am with the decisions that I make. And there's it's almost a necessary part of leadership development that you start by emulating others to some extent. You look at what they do and you try to emulate that. But over time, it sounds like you've discovered, and I have too, with lots of mentorship and coaching, and you do know a little bit. And it is okay to express your personal opinions about things. And it is okay to say the things that you know to be true from your own experience. That doesn't mean you're not open to being wrong, because gosh, you better be, because the world changes and beliefs held too tightly can be a hindrance instead of a help. But you still have to embody your own personhood as a leader. If not, it is always going to be a facsimile of somebody else's style.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to be a different, my coach, Don, says, otherwise you're going to be a different person in different times and with different people.
Yeah.
And, it's important from a communication perspective. It's important from a management perspective. It's important from a decision-making perspective. I believe that when you're a senior leader in an organization, the decisions you are making should not be easy ones, because easy decisions should have been made somewhere else lower in the chain, right? So the decisions you're seeing are fundamentally very hard, and they are probabilistic.
Right.
If I do this, there's a 30% chance this could happen, 50% chance this could happen, and 20% this could happen. If I do this, there's a 40% chance.
Yes.
I believe that a way to make those decisions is to do that in accord with values. And to do that in accord with values, you have to know who you are and what your values are. And what I've found is when I do that, or when I sort of have an opportunity to coach my leaders or others to do that, if you can look at the probabilistic decision and look at the actual facts, right, and an assessment of that, but then if it's like a judgment call, or if it's gray, where you're not certain, and if you can rely on making a values-based decision, even though it may not go right. And if it doesn't go right, you have to pick it up quickly and you have to remediate as fast as possible, right? But if it doesn't go right, if you made that decision in accord with values, and values that are articulated, understood, and hopefully part of the common belief system, it's very hard to fault.
Yeah.
In some ways, doing that work with a coach is almost like therapy.
Yes, it is. Very similar.
I think that's super duper important, especially as you sort of continue in terms of the gradation of responsibility, and accountability and anxiety in an organization.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had lots of opportunities over the course of my career to participate in, and the organization provided some of this, with coaches, with coach training, training to be a coach, an internal coach for Banner, and those things really taught me a lot. And you're right, it's not all that different from therapy. And the two things that I go back to all the time, and folks that listen to this podcast will have heard me say this ad nauseum probably, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's important stuff. And there were two concepts that I thought were really important to me as a leader. And one is because it helps diffuse my frustration or my anger or my poor response sometimes if I'm not completely aligned, is curiosity. Instead of getting angry, I was, asking myself, why would somebody say something like that? What is their belief system that they would think that to be true?
Yes.
And curiosity has been a very powerful tool for me. And the other one is, I remember, and this was again, Dr. Hensing telling me early on, I was very upset with somebody who was making what I thought was a very foolish decision. And how could they? And I was going to have a confrontation with them. And Dr. Hensing took me aside. And he said, Robert, there's almost nothing worth destroying a relationship over. There's almost nothing worth that. You'll live to fight another day. This is not the end of the world. Maintain your relationships, stay connected. And that's where that fundamental piece of my philosophy comes from. Yeah.
Right.
And it really is good advice. Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't heard that articulated like that. And I probably agree 95 to 99% of the time. 95.
Yes. There you go. 95. We'll go with that. Leadership is one of those things that I think is in short supply in healthcare nowadays.
I wonder about this. In a leadership team, I think diversity of thought and perspective is extremely important.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is also an era that we are going through as a country of profound political polarization. And the value basis is very different.
Yeah.
Because of that degree of polarization that now exists, I think, and a perception, which may or may not be correct, that there is a values basis to that polarization, I think it makes for something very problematic on teams.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of just thinking about just in terms of the dialogue and dynamics of the United States right now.
No, I could not agree with you more, Rishi. And I when I think about this, I can't help but think that answers that work are very often, if not almost always, between the two extremes. And to latch on to one and to be so closed-minded about that there's absolutely nothing that could change one's mind, that is a guarantee of excess to some extent. I mean, if you're not open to new data, then you've lost your ability to be adaptable. And, it's not to be too Darwinian, but, it's not survival of the fittest as you come out with it. It's a survival of those organisms that are most able to adapt to a changing environment. That's really what the message is in evolution. And I think it's true of social evolution as well. And when we get polarized on one extreme or another and have lost our ability to listen and to be curious about, why others would think that, we've lost the ability to adapt to the circumstances and therefore lost the ability to be maximally effective.
I agree with your points there. And, I'd say that just to expand and plus one on it, because you've referenced now this idea of curiosity a couple times. There are two corollary traits to that too. One is growth mindset, Carol Dweck's book.
Right.
The other, sort of a corollary or similar to curiosity, intellectual humility.
Oh.
Jim Collins in Good to Great talks about these ideas of, humility with sort of fortitude. Adam Grant in his last book also talks about humble confidence. And I think if you tease apart these ideas, the concepts of psychological safety, this idea of intellectual, also, leaders require fortitude and they require conviction, right? This dog on a bone, this persistence.
Right.
But when you're balancing this idea that I don't know all the answers,
yeah,
I'm going to be brave enough to ask questions, even if it makes me seem foolish.
Yes.
So what you're saying resonates a lot with me.
Yeah, no. And it's interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking about how common it is for folks to get behind somebody who is absolutely certain that they're right, how easy that is to do versus somebody who says, well, I think this is the direction we should be headed, but we should be open to new ideas, which is far more effective in the big picture.
Yeah.
And so there's this balancing act of how do you rally people to support whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, while at the same time not overhyping it because you could be wrong, that intellectual humility. And I think the answer and at least in my book, the only thing I've come up with, the answer has to be value-based. It has to be value-based because you don't know for sure, but you can hang your hat on values. And not everyone's values will be the same, but it is not difficult to find in any group some values that align well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read any of Jonathan Haidt's work on
Yes.
value systems, and it's fascinating. It really is. And that he had the intellectual curiosity to say, well, I'm a liberal and I've always been a liberal, but why? And does the other side have something to say? And when he discovered this, yes, they do have something to say.
Right.
It might be taken to excess in its extremes. So is it taken to excess on the left in its extremes? But both sides have something to say that's valuable. Let's tease that out and figure out how to find that middle ground.
Agreed. I don't know how we got on this, but this was great.
I know. I love these conversations. I really do. And they're so important. The loss of trust in institutions in this country, is related to all the things we're talking about. If you tell people with absolute certainty a mask is going to protect you, and then the data comes out and it's like, well, in some circumstances, maybe, and other circumstances, maybe not. And nuance is the way the world works. And to ignore that, well, you do it at your peril because you're going to be wrong enough at the time that people will lose confidence.
That's right. That's very true.
So talk to me a little bit. How that translated into the role that you and I met at the Health Management Academy. I guess we were trying to figure out what year that was.
It was 2011, I think.
What point in your career were you at Advocate when you attended the Health Management Academy? What would you say about that experience, and how has your life changed since then?
Yeah, so I was in my first year in my corporate role, my system role.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'd already been an advocate, I think, for two or 3 years, I think, at our large hospital, Advocate Christ. So it was a really important pivot point, of going to sort of system level responsibility. And, in addition to the fellowship and then the education and the network, again, speaking of mentors, tremendous mentorship by the late Gary Bisbee.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
He helped so many, he did so much for so many, that I couldn't go without acknowledging.
Rishi, I thank you for bringing that up. There's a big hole where Gary used to be, and for those who do not know, he died suddenly, and none of us were prepared for it. I don't know how you ever prepare for something like that. It was unexpected, and it left a big hole because he was one of those folks that just helped so many people. There was so much of an outpouring of love. We all go back, I guess, and to some extent say, I wish I'd said this, I wish I'd said that more, I wish I'd, but I think Gary knew how much we all respected him and loved him, and he'll be missed. Yeah, thank you for reminding us.
When I think back about the leadership lessons I learned from Gary, and it speaks to something that you said just a little while ago, connection.
He was all about that. Absolutely. Yes. It always felt personal with Gary. And he always cared about the tiniest. I was shocked because I'd been out of health management for a little bit, and I just kind of asked him, hey, would you mind meeting with me for an hour? Oh, sure. Let's have lunch. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. And it felt like he knew me. Yeah. And like he took an interest in what I was interested in and wanted to help me. It was an amazing experience and a great lesson for all of us in leadership.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
That was really important. And look, I will always say that an advocate is where I kind of grew up as a leader.
Yeah.
How to be a leader in terms of operating model and dashboards and cascading of metrics and managing performance. And, I think it's a very well-run organization.
Yeah.
That's where I grew up. I learned the systems, I learned the approach, and it was something, I ended up bringing with me then in my future roles that I think was just, again, sort of pivotal and catalytic. Again, thanks to mentorship as well along the way.
Yes. So I guess now what I want to ask, and we do, I think I've got it right this time. We got about 10 minutes left. So
ready.
Let me ask you this. It's a big question, and I don't expect a simple answer, but what do you see as the fundamental problem in the healthcare system today, and what can any of us do to begin to right the ship? What needs to be done?
Just so we tell your viewers, you didn't exactly tee this up in advance with me so that I could cogitate.
I like spontaneity.
It sounds like you want a single answer, and I think about there's certainly a business model challenge, the perspective of working through and navigating as a patient and consumer, even if you're a super user or the system is extremely painful, extremely difficult. That's true. The cost of healthcare is problematic as well. I could gravitate to all of these things. And if I had to boil it down to one idea, it would be that the trust in the system is broken.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the trust that exists between healthcare, doctors, healthcare and employees, healthcare patients, healthcare community.
Yeah.
But the rallying cry, there's this phrase that they use at SC Johnson, totally different company. They do Windex and Raid and
lots of stuff.
They use a phrase that they are there to champion the trust agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can embrace that and you ask what that means, I think that leads to a whole sort of strategies and tactics that perhaps have not always been envisioned, we haven't always been authentic to, or if we are, we've been kind of doing it because we're worried about disruptors, we're worried about market share, we're worried about unionization. See, it's not like you're responding to a threat. You're actually embracing a value.
Got it. That makes a whole lot of sense.
I think that would lead to a different way of leadership.
If that's your North Star, you make very different decisions as opposed to, I want to maximize profit.
I guess it's cultural and values-based, and it comes down to trust. And you were talking about trust just a little while ago.
That's a brilliant insight. I love that. I love that because without it, nothing else will be accomplished.
Yep.
That's just the bottom line. It has been such a joy to talk to you, Rishi. I hope you will agree to come back and be on the show again, because there's so much we could talk about. And you're one of my favorite people to talk to. I love the way you think. I love the way you make me think. So once again, Rishi, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. And wishing you all the best. And we'll talk again soon.
Sounds great, Robert. Thank you for having me here.
And with that, we're going to say so long.
You've been listening to The Groves Connection, your connection to the inside story on healthcare, featuring in-depth interviews with those who know. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, give us a 5-star review to keep the connection going, and hit the subscribe button to be sure you never miss a beat. The Groves Connection is produced by Dr. Robert Groves. Original music, editing, and creative direction provided by Alden Groves. Production support, content guidance, courtesy of Janae Sharp and Elizabeth Barrett. Thank you for listening. The professional ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and do not reflect those of any current or past employers. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time on The Groves Connection.